Hello, everyone, and welcome to this podcast. This has been a long time coming. We're very excited to have the one, the only, the original Mark Z, who is a legend in this following in this industry, and he has been gracious enough to join us today for all things financial, of course, which is his milieu, among other things. And we'll be kind of getting his insights as to where he sees things going on with the Godly Global Reset. If you are new to the podcast, please do like, subscribe, and share, as it helps the channel grow and others gain in the knowledge that you have been afforded. I have to say, Mark has the most succinct and humble bio I've ever seen, and it simply goes like this: podcaster, economist, political commentator, father, writer, believer, at hashtag the original Mark Z. And we have the one and only himself, Mark Z, here. How are you doing today, good sir?
Fantastic. No complaints at all. I am honored. This is one that has definitely been a long time coming. So I'm tickled. I'm honored to be here with you today, John.
Well, I
You've
appreciate
become
it.
a friend through this process.
Yeah, you have too. You've given me some great information. You've supported our channel more than I think people know. You helped us gain the relationship, for example, with Ian and Noble Gold, and that has been a blessing to us, and more importantly to the audience, because it gives them more of a opportunities to quality vendors that are relevant at this particular time in history. So let's start simple, Mark, and just build, because I know we're going to get into all the juicy intel stuff, but um, for my audience is not familiar, how did you get started in this movement? How long you've been doing it, and what was the motivation for you to do
No, this one's wow. Where do we start on this one?
it?
Um, you know, it started owning CMKX. And then my uncle and I, who were working with drilling equipment, natural resources, had an opportunity to start delivering some in Africa. Next thing I know, I'm helping supply gold mines. And I meet a contact there from Bank of Japan, and they are desperately trying to buy gold because they say he was just up front. He said, "We don't know when, but we're going to reset to a gold-backed standard." And central banks are trying to slowly and quietly collect as much gold as they can in preparation. Of course, this was like early 2000s. And I was kind of surprised. I wasn't too surprised because I did study economics, and I was like, I mean, it happens every time at the end of a fiat cycle. For those that follow worldwide economics and the history thereof, I mean, it's wash, rinse, repeat. It's a cycle. So I knew it was coming. Uh, it was just unusual that this time it was going to be a global change, not just the three or four allies of certain countries. They were all preparing for it. So I just started digging and digging and digging, and have just been fortunate enough to make just a lot of wonderful friends and contacts through the process. You got the cliff notes on that one.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a lot more succinct than I was expecting, but that's okay. I just kind of was sitting back and listening. Okay, thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. Um, Actually, that's a good segue, Mark, for me to show you one of the screenshots I was going to show you. So let's start with that. Let me know when you can see the screen here.
I can see it.
So all I did basically is just went up to Google and just pulled up a spot price today. And as of, I don't know, this is probably an hour or two old, this information, but it's fairly relevant, which is today, gold's trading over, as 3,030 an ounce, crude oil, WTI at 67 a barrel, silver priced at over 34 an ounce. So it's getting back to its previous all-time highs. So my natural question and inclination, Mark, would be President Trump's talked a lot about 65 a barrel, and you and I have talked about this offline, the significance of that demarcation number, because as I always tell my audience, and I'm really dying to get your perspective on this, that it's costing currently, as we know it, 16 a barrel for the Iraqis to make oil at cost. So 65 would be roughly 3x on that, which is just enough to bend their knee, because they're going to have to start showing their other assets. I'm sorry, you look like you had a confusion, or
No. I'm listening and thinking through some of the things that have recently popped in their press that dovetail with it. So just keep going.
Okay, if you had something to say, I didn't want to stop you. So he's made mention of that. Was it yesterday or the day before? He mentioned in one of his press conferences 65, which I thought was interesting, which is another comp. We're obviously over the 3,000 Rubicon with gold, and that just leads me to believe that, okay, we know the Fort Knox audit is coming. Musk is going to do a live stream. Are we going to find that the emperor has no clothes, as I put it? And so, all that being said, where do you see things now with the gold, silver, and oil, and where do you see it going? Just say over the next 2 weeks.
One, it's pretty interesting on the 65 and that level because it appears that Trump gets a win. OPEC has just openly in the last 24 hours said we're going to up production. So obviously there's some behind the scenes deal that's already gone on to get that price down into that range. Still makes it sustainable for Iraq to increase value of their currency, take care of their bills because they can increase production. Also, what most people don't know is it is now. Let's see here, and this is probably one I should have made a point to share with you. They're talking about the oil reserves in Iraq. They're now going to lead the world in oil reserves by 2025 with all their new discoveries. So they're pumping it and they're lowering our cost, but to offset it, they're allowing to increase production. A lot of people out there that are worried that if oil doesn't stay over $70 a barrel, that Iraq won't be able to increase their purchasing power, and that's just not accurate. Sorry, I got on a side tangent there as soon as I heard that because I know a lot of people are worried about that.
No, I'm glad you clarified that. And again, they have to, as you know, do that to satisfy the Kurds, the largest bloc. In fact, that would be another good segue, Mark, to your cogent point here. You probably have seen this document many, many times, but this is coming from Pareto Securities, if you're familiar. Earlier this,
Yes.
actually back in February, as you can see, Iraq's parliament is clearing the way for Kurdistan exports, to your point about oil. And I'll try to zoom in a little bit so people can see some of the articles and the bylaws, if you will, particularly for the SOMO side of Iraq with oil. So I was wondering if you could kind of, in your own words, expound on this document and why that might be significant for people to know this info.
I'm probably going to just back up to one of the things I was told early on. I've got a contact in the finance ministry there.
Okay.
And he said that when you see the herbal HCL, when you see that taking care of the problems between the the KRG, Kurdistan Regional Government, and Baghdad, that within hours or days we would see a value change. So when I see that and they're laying out the framework, it's a real world indicator of just how close we are. It gives me something I can sink my teeth into because I was told, almost 20 years ago to, these are the benchmarks that you're looking for. And I'm seeing there you go. You got it in print. One of my benchmarks.
I'm glad you brought that up because actually I want to back up a second, Mark. And you were talking about OPEC, rightly. It got me to thinking, why does Iraq even need OPEC in their business? Why can't we just extricate OPEC altogether and make Iraq sovereign without their oversight?
I've asked that same question, like why? But then I look back and I go back to some old video footage where it appears that the prince bowed to or is working with Donald Trump when he did his world tour, between the Pope, the Queen, etc., all the world leaders. And I'm wondering if there is more coordination than we know. And also, when I go back and I look at how when Kuwait revalued, they backed it with some assets and also a basket of currencies. And that's when they revalued. They threw it in with that same regional basket. Saudi Arabia is one of those countries. Iraq is looking to do the same. I don't know if you've ever, and I need to pull together as much documentation as I can for folks, but the IDNR project, where the NAR was going to be backed by a certain amount of gold and a certain amount of assets and a certain amount in a basket of currencies from the region.
Right.
So I'm kind of wondering, because OPEC is so big in the region, whether that is the compromise because they're going in that basket and they want to help support all the currencies in the region, because by supporting theirs and working together on the production side, it increases everybody's values, Iraq as well. So I'm wondering if they're just playing nice to help support that basket, that currency basket.
Yeah, no, it's a good preponderance of thought. I guess I'll have to see, as always, how it plays out. And then we go to your point, we go to, let's see, we're at the 18th today. So basically in 2 weeks, roughly tomorrow, April 2nd. He keeps talking about bringing up that date a lot on Air Force One. Talk about April 1st, how he's superstitious, but is that really a calm mark? Because April 1st, as you well know, and your audience I'm sure knows, is the first official day of the true new year in the calendar, particularly in the Middle East for business, especially with Eid ending on the 31st as we round the bend of Ramadan. Is that really what he's talking about? And then inside of the cons, and I'm just brainstorming with you, wouldn't that seem to suggest that, and again, we're not big on dates and rates here because there's so many variables and moving parts, but looking inside the looking glass, if you will, wouldn't that seem, if he's bringing up that date, there's something significant going to happen around that time or behind that time?
To me, it makes perfect sense because he keeps signaling that date. But we also, the 24th and 25th, India's announced that they're going to update their nationwide. Your banks are not going to be functioning for a couple of days,
Mm-hmm.
as they do like a nationwide update. There are just so many things pointing towards, well, kind of kicking in starting this week, but so much pointing for the 20 something through April 2nd, just around the globe, not just the US, not just Trump saying, hey, April 2nd is going to be huge. I think you're onto something. I'm very, if we don't already know about a reset before then, I do think that that's a key date.
It seems to be. That's why I just want to pick your brain about it. And then you're also right with India. You also have Putin with Russia has already said, as you know, one of the many articles out there, I think they're backing their oil exports with XRP by at least 50%. So they're already kind of moving into that BRICS motion, right? And so with that in mind, I want to show you, Mark, another one to get your impressions on here, which seem to be important. You've probably seen this already. BRICS Info reporting, I believe yesterday, President Trump says Chinese President Xi Jinping will be visiting the US in the not too distant future, which, as you know, they've probably already done this optically. And this is mostly, excuse me, they've done it behind the scenes announced for optics for the narrative, I meant to say. And so that to me seems to suggest the China-Taiwan initiative as it relates to Vietnam. And I was curious to get your thoughts on that.
Where do I even start on that one? That one's particularly big.
Yeah.
Because it's connections to Taiwan, it's connections to Vietnam, it's connections to Indonesia, as they come forth, and them sitting down. One, I think they've already worked out anything they need to work out, and I think the public tour is going to be more of a optics. We're going to need to convince the world when they start rolling out this new plan. And Scott Bessent said yesterday, let me make certain I get this one right.
Sure.
Give me just a second. I'm looking at an article with Scott. Here it is.
Take your time.
Came out and said we are resetting and we're putting things on a sustainable path. That we're changing the track, we're changing the economics, we're changing the spending levels, we're changing everything. What we were doing was unsustainable, and there could be a little crisis as they settle. So when I look at that, I'm looking at them talking about reset. I'm looking at meetings with Xi Jinping, Putin, the peace conversation, hour and a half phone call today between Trump and Putin. Looks like it has us on the verge of them announcing peace in the Ukraine. To me, it's just everything coming together at once while we're watching all those world leaders set up those meetings. I've got contacts from Iraq telling me that Al-Awlaq has secretly been in stateside in meetings with Trump, State Department, and Treasury. So I'm trying to watch so many things at one time. We're watching what feels like to me decades of everything coming together at one time.
Well, we are, because it's all been coming together, as you know, for this seminal moment in time. But that actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is like two questions I was thinking about as you were sharing. So let's start with this, what you were talking about with the peace deals. So we've got the Ukraine situation with the ceasefire. We have what's going on with the Houthis. And, Friday night, all the big news coming out with, the Kim Clement prophecy, long ago prophesied, of course, coming to pass with, Israel ginning up over 400,000 troops at the border of Yemen near Iran, right? Getting ready. They've already started their seminal attacks on the periphery. You have Trump, who hit the ISIS caliphate again Friday night, and then you have the Houthis, like I mentioned. So you have the Ukraine ceasefire. We have now China coming here to meet optically. You've got Putin with Russia optically. and then of course Israel for last. So I'm curious your impressions on, do you see these peace deals all happening at once, or do you see them happening sequentially side by side?
I think sequentially side by side.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes the most logical sense to me. Doesn't mean I'm right, just means that's what makes the most logical
Sure.
sense to me. But I mean, we're watching. Then we also, of course, overnight last night, we saw the U.S. Step up, vastly step up its war on the Houthis, especially in Yemen, to put an end to all of these things. Seems to be a mad dash to finish all these negotiations. It's almost like a countdown before Elon launches another rocket.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I agree with you. I think it's going to be sort of systematic, step by, they'll kind of overlap each other, because if you do it all at once, it's too much for people to absorb. But if you, it gives him more victories he can show in stages, optically for the people to see. Which brings me to my next second question on this part. Um, People, I think, are having a hard struggle sometimes, and I get it, because you and I are sort of more on the inside track, presumably, at least you are, at least, is that, there's a lot of corruption with Iraq. Some would argue more than even in the US, because, the countries copy each other. And I think some of my audience is struggling with the notion that Soudani, who has done so many great things, has shown so much promise, is still linked to a great deal of corruption, particularly with money laundering or the dollar. I think they found somewhere around 92 billion that he's smuggled, and he's not alone, Maliki. They're all in it. And it looks like behind the scenes, they're getting ready to replace him. It would be our hope that if they do that, that they go back to a body, because he promised to put his life on the line for these reforms and he didn't make good on it. Everybody needs a second chance sometimes. And I think he would make good on it this time if given the chance. So I was curious to get your thoughts on that.
I'm still like undecided on that one, because now we're also seeing Sudani work closely with Sadir to overcome the block with Maliki. In other words, turning on Maliki and joining forces to get things finished. I'm not convinced that Sudani is not there to get it finished and then leave immediately, almost like Yeltsin was there to oversee the dismantling of the Soviet Union.
Mm.
I'm beginning to believe there is more there than we know as I watch that one develop. And I can't wait to find out the truth. I mean, how much of this is for show? How much of this do we have right? I cannot wait. And also, before I forget, guys, don't let Jon downplay his contacts in this thing. They're as good as mine or better.
Uh, I wouldn't say that, but I appreciate the support. Thank you. The Mutual Admiration Society here. It's very nice of you. Thank you. We do our best. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. I mean, it's nobody's perfect, obviously, but we're all, I think in this circle here, we're all trying, my team, your team is doing our level best to get as close as we can. And that if we work together, our synergy is better than trying to do it on our own. I think we would agree is the seminal message for our audiences, right? And so,
No, absolutely. And don't fight over one thing,
yeah.
blue, red, Ford, Chevy, Carolina Duke, go Duke. Uh, I like college basketball. We do. The community spend too much time fighting over
Yeah.
little pieces of it. Do you agree on 80, 90% of it? Do you agree that God wins? We're supposed to agree we're supposed to do great things with this.
Yes.
And I just wish people would focus on that instead of petty middle school politics as we go through this process. We're all going to find out that we were right about some things, wrong about other things. So
Yeah.
for me, I keep preaching unity, 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 and that's one of the reasons I was looking so forward to this one today.
Likewise. No, I can't tell you how many times, and I do our weekly wrap up summations during the week. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I've said to my audience so many times, look, folks, um, don't be hung up on, if you look at, we all agree in this community that, the you want to call it the mainstream, the legacy, the fake news, whatever moniker you want to put on it. If we have agreed that they're not in it for our best interest, then going from the frying pan to the fire doesn't make a lot of sense. To then come in this community and say, well, this guy's right and this gal's wrong, or this gal, that just creates the same sort of divisive tactics we were trying to escape in the first place, right? And our synergy, our oneness is in our synergy working together. And as you said, We're going to find out in the aftermath there were some things that we were right about that we didn't know, and some things we were wrong about that we thought we were right. It's all relative. But if we're going in it with the mindset of helping God's people, giving people win and cross the finish line, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So,
Amen.
so I'm with you. So that all being said, one other thing I'd love you to help me sort of, I don't know if your audience has these issues. I think, I would imagine that there's some crossover with your and my audience in terms of dilemmas of things, these nuances that happen. So I'd love for you to help me kind of, I think, revalidate or confirm this point. Tends to be a lot of issues sometimes with certain people, and it could be people new to the movement, or maybe they've come out of it and coming back in. There's all kinds of things there to consider. I come across this from time to time in terms of people's concern about, well, am I going to have to pay taxes on the currency, and what about this and what about that, and how the bank's going to work and so forth. And I've tried to share with people from our knowledge base that the global tax treaty years ago from my mentor Don showed me that there was never taxes on it. There was a broker fee, just like you would pay a broker fee with gold and silver, cost of doing business. When you buy it, you sell it, they get a fee. So could you kind of just touch on that from your experience?
I got a lot of contacts in the banking world as well, and they've got costs. They got to pay the employees to sit there. They got to pay to do the any type of check that needs to be done to make certain you're not a terrorist. I've been told that from day one, that all we're going to have to pay is whatever that fee is, and I'm told they've been capped at a very low percentage.
Mhm.
And it makes perfect sense to me. I also don't understand why people are that worried about it. I mean, you're getting ready to receive, a massive gift from God that we're supposed to use to further His kingdom. At least that's what I believe.
Agreed.
And to me, it just seems wrong to look at God and go, I'm going to need more, God. That's just me. A lot of other people are going to be, yes, but I want to do great things with it. And God knows you want to do great things with it.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfectly said. And yeah, from my side of things, talking to, like yourself, wealth managers, private bankers, and obviously, the difference there. They've all indicated to me that it would be, at present anyway, up subject to change, a 1% basis fee, for the exchange, which is very nominal compared to what you would pay if you were, as you know, paying taxes. So that's kind of been my understanding. Still with us, Mark? So as I was telling you, Mark, from my side, looking into the banking context that we have at Wells Fargo and some other places similar to yourself, delineation between, of course, as you know, wealth managers and private bankers, you know that all too well. They've always indicated to me, at least to this point, subject to change, there would be a 1% basis fee, which equates to about 100,000 per transaction, which is nominally cheaper than if you were to actually pay taxes on it, as to your point. And I also think you're right that it's one of the things we try to remind our audience of, and I'm sure you do as well with your audience. Mindset is key. We need to move from lack to abundance. God doesn't hold His hand out and say, "Oh, I'm only going to give you this or that." He's going to give you according to what you can handle and to the degree that you're going to bless others. So, like you said, He knows your heart. He knows what you want to do to help people, and He's going to make provisions for that to happen. So I think it's really just a mindset adjustment ultimately.
I think it is too, and I encourage people to think that way. And I've mentioned this before. If this thing would have gone 15 years ago, I'd have bought jets and big houses and everything else. Now I just want to help people. I'm totally fine with a small house. I just don't want to have to worry each month, and I want to help as many people as I can. So God has used, call it delay, call it purposeful, call it whatever you want. He has used that time to change a tremendous portion of our community, and I think it's wonderful.
I
I'm
agree.
just blown away by the things that people want to do and want to help. Back to your 1%, though, that did remind me of something I was told some time ago. One of the biggest differences between, let's call us 4A or people in the know, I was told if you just walk in off the street, your fees are going to be somewhere between 3 and 5%. So to me, being part of a group aggregating makes just huge sense.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you for that. I'm trying to think of some other things. Oh, this is another one I wanted to kind of show you, Mark. I'm sure you touch on Zimbabwe. I know you've touched on it before, but wanted to kind of throw this at you and see what you thought. This is let me see if I can pull it up here. Let me know if you can see this. This is on X, Nelson Chamisa. I'm sure you're familiar with him, a godly Christian man who was the previous leader of Zimbabwe and is being brought in to be the established successor. Right now, it was a rumor at the time, so we didn't really want to talk about it until it was more confirmed, but we've now had it confirmed, as I'm sure you know, that a lot of the residents, citizens, whatever you want to call them, in Zimbabwe are establishing a coup to oust Mnangagwa because of his rife corruption, not unlike lots of parts throughout the world. So he's talking here, this is as of yesterday on X, about all the great things to come in Zimbabwe, phenomenal growth, encyclopedic prosperity, which is a unique way to put it, unprecedented success for values in the fear and love of God, a governance of service, sacred duty, good governance, exemplary care of the citizens, so on and so forth. First-rate infrastructure. Sounds a lot like President Trump, first of all. And we know that he's been working with President Trump, the gold ties. He's working with Elon Musk because of the Starlink that was established. I believe it was last July when they got that in position. So, one begets the other. As you know, President Trump, I think it was, somebody will correct me, I'm sure, but I think it was one of the last episodes of The Apprentice. He gave somebody, and they've taken it offline since, what a coincidence, about the Zimbabwe, the $100 trillion note. And it wasn't worth much then, but it'll be worth a lot. So I say this to you to say, what are your thoughts on what Nelson Chamisa is saying? Do you think he will be the next successor? And have you heard anything in conjunction with this?
I have not heard specifically anybody say that one, but I loved his comment on the encyclopedic growth. In other words, he's talking about growth for the history books.
Mm.
And I love the term that he used for it. But I've not heard specifically that he's returning. I have heard that they were positioning for a return of a leader, just nobody mentioned his name. I was told some time ago that our Zim notes that we're hanging on to are going to be treated more as humanitarian, almost like a modern day prosperity package, more so than based off of Zimbabwe's ability to make dollars, thinking like their currency. I was told I need to look at it more as that's coming from humanitarian funds and not necessarily coming from their growth of their currency, kind of like we're seeing what we expect in Iraq or Vietnam or Indonesia. Does that make any sense? Hopefully I didn't screw that description up.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. I mean, you're just putting it to the best of your ability of what you've ascertained, and that's fine. Yeah, as far as I've understood from the banks I've talked to, they are going to treat it as a bond, and it will have they'll have a separate division for the bonds than the currency, which makes sense. And I haven't heard anything different. It could change, of course, but at the latest we've heard is it would be about a 7-year managed payout because of the size and scope of how valuable Zimbabwe would be. I mean, just look at we did a report, was it 2 weeks ago? I believe South Africa is I think they're number 3 in the world in gold reserves, just ahead of the US. And so they've got massive amounts of gold. So they have no problem backing it against the ZiG. What we think they're going to do is they're going to take the ZiG dollar with the digital gold coin and wrap the Zim bond into that and make it all one congruent, unit essentially.
Yeah, which certainly makes sense. And that's similar to what we heard probably 10 years ago out of Iraq as they were explaining the I-dinar. Which would be similarly backed by metals, their petrochemical reserves, and their basket of currencies. So very similar. And to me, it's very interesting that the countries that we're looking for the revaluations all have very similar stories. If you just go back over the last 10, 15 years and really study or watch what was being discussed, where they're headed, where they believe they're headed. And I just find that just fascinating when you were talking about that with Zimbabwe, because it almost perfectly matches what Iraq was discussing and Indonesia was discussing.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's a good point. That actually, Mark, I wasn't thinking about this, but now that you mention it, it kind of brings up sort of a sub question. I'm sure you've heard it many times. As you said, history repeats itself. There's been within certain camps of our movement, there has been some consternation or discussion about well, is Vietnam going to go ahead of Iraq, or Iraq going to be the ribbon cutter? I personally believe that it will be Iraq, because they were they've been in it the longest, and then everyone will follow successively after, like Vietnam, for instance. From the best that you can ascertain on your side, is that still your understanding?
It is.
Okay.
It's think of it as like a cornerstone. It's not the only part of this reset, but it is one of the most important. And it's also one of the easiest for us to track and watch. So we do.
Right. So thank you, with your relationships that you have overseas in Iraq, they're like what, 13 days away from, well, 12 days away from Ramadan and Eid. When we look back historically at the Kuwaiti dinar, it escapes me, but if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it around the springtime when that happened?
It was pretty certain it was during Ramadan that it
Okay.
happened.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I thought it was like at the tail end of Ramadan, around this ish time.
It's like the last Tuesday or Thursday of Ramadan, if I remember correctly, and I don't have it in front of me. So I'm certain somebody out there will set the record straight and add it in
Sure.
and comments for this video when it releases.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. And then one of the things that my mentor Don always talked about with me, which I just thought was kind of an interesting aside, is the UN operational rates, right? So you look at, typically it's 12th and 28th, and just like a paycheck, 15th and the 30th for most people. And again, this is not about, again, dates or rates. It's just interesting timelines kind of intersecting, because like you said, future proves past. Um, what level, if any, does the UN have in an involvement in this, or are they kind of a non sequitur?
I'm still trying to figure that one out because we're looking. Uh, I think that has more importance on the Iraqi side, but not so much on the overall side. Um, when I go back and look at it, what makes more sense would be more like World Bank, IMF, those things having
Mm.
having a bigger role in this process. But the UN does have a role in releasing some of the sanctions, et cetera, for one or two of the currencies that we're all watching. Um, so I think they're important. I don't think they are I'm trying to.
Not the end all be all.
They're not the end all be all, but they are a step in the process.
Yeah, yeah, it's a means to an end. Yeah, I think that's probably about right. Is there
And
any?
it offers legitimacy to a lot of the world when these values change. If the UN's on board, they were part of the process. I know IMF, World Bank, Rothschild, I get all that stuff and their roles in the past, but we expect all those roles to change. But it does for the average citizen around the world, those rubber stamps from all those agencies, it matters a lot to them.
Mhm.
They need that reassurance. They're not like you or me that can take something on faith. A lot of these people can't take it on faith. They need somebody in government to say, boom, this is how it is. Otherwise, they just don't believe it. And when you start bringing in those agencies and you start giving, oh, yeah, this was done by this agency, that was done by, it means a lot to average consumer out there. They may not understand anything behind it, but if a big agency tells them that it's okay, then it's okay.
Right, right. Fair enough. Actually, you just got me thinking. I'm trying to comb the recesses of my mind to think of things that maybe my audience has asked me in the past about some of these little, because we're kind of at the ancillary details mark at this point. Uh, there's been some concern of some of my audiences, not everybody, but certain people have said, there's that FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Like, how am I going to know when it goes into the banks? And is it going to be on the internet? I mean, I've always told my audience that it'll always be on the internet. You can't hide it anymore. It's just too out there now. Plus, all the major financial news markets are going to have to, in some way, whether it's a ticker, message of some nondescript type, they're going to have to. I mean, you had President Trump at the ostensibly State of the Union a couple of weeks ago, right? Talking about, if you remember, towards the end of his speech, he said, the Middle East, there's a lot going on behind the scenes there. To me, that was a very clear and present sign of him telling us in the community, hey, I'm doing things there. I'm cleaning things up. I'm finishing the process. So curious on that. And then anything you can shed on giving people reassurance that they're not going to miss out. It'll get out in the public purview somehow.
There's no way you guys are going to miss out on this one. We're talking about a change of an epic level, and it'll be discussed. around the world. And I was told very, very directly from two different banks, one of them you've discussed today a couple of times, that they were going to send out directions for currency holders to people like ourselves and the news aggregating sites. As long as you follow any one of us, or you get a regular email from recaps or any other of the news aggregating sites, you guys are going to be okay. There's not something that you could possibly miss and not know about.
Yeah,
Just not possible.
yeah, I agree. I just wanted to hear that from you, from the horse's mouth. Trying to think if there was any. I know there's, you're going to forget something, but there's so many nuances to this whole thing.
Oh, there's so many, and I am hoping once people watch this video, they can ask more questions and comments, and we can do another one
Oh yeah, yeah,
to directly answer their questions.
yeah. I mean, it's an ongoing process, right, until the very end, because that's what we're tasked with, and we will certainly, for sure, do that. I'm trying to think.
Speaking of which,
Yeah.
like after this thing goes, are you going to stay on the scene? To me, so many people are going to need help, suggestions, advice, sounding boards, and I keep pushing folks. And I'm hoping because you are, you got a good, strong Christian voice, and you seem concerned about the community and people in general. I mean, are you going to stay around? A lot of folks are planning on disappearing.
Well, I am definitely concerned and genuinely, like yourself, in alignment with trying to get God's people across the finish line. Uh, Truthfully, I probably won't be here in the same capacity that I am, because the goal here for me is to move to Tennessee, as I've told you, refire my music career. But I will say that I will probably have a smaller, like a, I only say this to, I don't really care about the money part of it, of course. I just, like when I say a subscription, I mean like a small membership, like $5 a month or something like
Sure.
that, something stupid, simple, just to get a very sub audience. And I would probably be focused on, hey, this is what I'm, the new record, and how it's made, and the Christian audience, people we're working with, and so forth. And, by the way, as an aside, here's, the next iteration once we get through the meat of it, like here's the long range plan. So while I won't be here on scene in the capacity that we are now, I'll still be there in some smaller role to help wherever we can, to try to just complete the cycle, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. It's similar to what I've considered doing, something same like maybe $5 a month or whatever, just so that we can have an onboarding process to make certain as people that actually were in this, have gone through the process, exchange currencies, because I don't want to open them up at the same public level to the scrutiny. I
Yeah,
don't want, predators in the chat rooms looking to see who's got dollars as we discuss $1 million projects and things. So
agreed.
I was just curious on that one, what your plans were going to be moving forward. And mine are very similar, very similar.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. I mean, I'm just making an example. I would care if it's a buck. I mean, it doesn't, money will be negligible. It's like you said, it's really to create a private platform away from predators, bots, trolls, haters.
Exactly.
And it just gives the audience some exclusivity that they're on the inside track. Because like you said, this is more of a de facto public thing, but that is just a more of a microcosm of things. And maybe just field some general questions, really, namely to Mark, to your question, which I guess is as apropos as anything to talk about. Actually, it's probably a good question to go with you, is to help people in the areas of trust. Because we have done in the past some podcasts about trust. We brought on subject matter experts. Is a common law revocable versus irrevocable, and the benefits and the disadvantages, and what is best for your particular areas of direction and need. I could see some of my membership podcasts keyed in on that, post wealth issues, buying land, things of that nature, to kind of help people take the next level, to your previous question. So I'll answer it with that, but also ask you, what do you recommend in general to your audience in terms of trust? Which way do you typically steer them when as far as that's concerned?
I've been pushing my folks more to study, learn as much as you can, because there are pros and cons with different, from revocable to irrevocable to family limited partnerships. We do expect, or at least I expect, I've been told from day one, that we would have a return to more of a common law process.
Mm-hmm.
I don't push people to spend a fortune doing trust, because we don't know exactly what the system's going to look like.
Yeah.
How do you handle that with your community? I mean, I want them to be educated. I think having a trust is a great idea. I have one. I've got a common law trust. I went with a revocable just because I don't know what it's going to look like. But everybody's got to make their own decisions. I can't make decisions for you, but I can tell you there's so many resources out there for free. Even if you can't afford to make one now, you can afford to educate yourself.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp as you, Mark. I mean, as I said, we brought in last year subject matter experts. We brought them in repeatedly so that people could go back to previous podcasts, whether it's the original one or the third or fifth iteration, and cross compare notes. As you said, ask additional questions as people come up with comments and say, okay, let's filter this down a little bit more and drill down in specifics. But yeah, typically, again, not a financial advisor like yourself, and it's not constituted financial advice, just giving good quality information for people to use of their own personal discernment. With that out of the way being said, I typically recommend to people, it depends on your situation, right? For me, I have a common law trust as well. I have an irrevocable only because I'm single right now. I haven't been married yet. And I don't want to do a prenup, right? I don't want to start a relationship that's based on distrust. So for me, an irrevocable is perfect because it means I can buy the land, establish the property before I meet her in said Tennessee. And then when I bring her on, obviously, once we're, across the other side of it, then I can have those more in-depth discussions, and I don't plan on her going anywhere or me going anywhere. So I'm not so concerned about that. But then you have people, like yourself who are married, or people who've been married, and,
Oh, I'm not married, but
oh,
there
you're
are a
not.
lot of
Okay.
that have to
Sorry.
think that through.
Sorry, my apologies. But I mean, for people who are, okay, so like, people who, are newly married or who've been married for, I don't know, whatever, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, they're established. They have, kids that are maybe like you do, that are going through the, adult stages of their life and they're still living at home. And so there's life cycles, right? So then they get of a certain age and they leave the house. And with revocable, it's good because you can make those amendments. You have a little bit more flexibility. So that's kind of how we advise, if you will, or give guidance to our audience. We don't tell them, obviously, when we wouldn't, what to do, like you said, but it's situational depending what your need is and your needs are. And I would agree with you. You don't have to spend an exorbitant amount on trust. I mean, you know, as a baseline, 15 to 2,500 is pretty reasonable and is sort of the normal sort of, rote baseline for these trusts. And you get a lot out of them, particularly, with whom you're dealing with and how much involvement you have. We do recommend people have trustees that are not family, right? If you are dealing with larger amounts, maybe having a fiduciary owner, somebody that you trust that can oversee on your behalf, that can help, guide with you, have, a monthly meeting, even if everybody's in agreement, just have that meeting. It's just good, healthy maintenance for said trust, right? Just as if you had a company, you would have, group or board meetings or whatever. It's sort of the same type of governance, but that's generally what we suggest to our audience.
And that's, to me, is great advice as we move past this. Once we're on the other side of redemption, that we've got so many of those things to think about, and hiring a crew, having maybe even a professional person on that
Mhm.
trust is your time is going to be so valuable after this thing, what you can do with it. Don't hesitate to find somebody that knows more than you do to handle so many of those day-to-day things. Uh, can't suggest it enough.
Right.
Professional advice is, in most cases, is worth what you paid for, what you paid for it.
I couldn't agree more. Oh, it brings a sub question I would ask you, Mark. I was just thinking about it. So we have the Iraqis with a 3-year budget, right, going retroactive to 24 through 26, as you know. We believe in our team largely that's comprised because that's like, this is just a creative term we've used, but it's essentially a 3-year ceasefire with Iran, the big brother off of Iraq's back, right? But it has come up, and I'm curious to get your thoughts after 26 as present, that budget has to be either changed, amended, approved, or redressed. And there's concerns that the Iranians will try to come back in and, overlord their little brother. Have you heard anything about that?
There's always going to be that concern with, well, I don't know if it's always going to be that concern, but it's definitely a concern because you notice with Trump from cutting off all those ties he's trying to force, even getting rid of the military forces or bringing them into to the proper military, he's trying to avoid them becoming part of the Iranian Guard or similar to. He does seem to be absolutely, and I know from people behind the scenes there that it is their number one thing is making certain that Iraq is standing 100% on its own. Uh, in the past, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised to see us strike Iran and give it to, make it part of a greater Persia, and Iraq and Iran will be blended together.
Mm.
But that was in the past. Now, I don't think that so much, but I do find the thought fascinating because you've got to make a change there. You can't have that Iranian influence inside of Iraq.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, which is why I want to ask you that question, which you kind of thought the long range agenda or plans were to sort of counteract that. I think maybe a good question to end with today, Mark, is on the subject of BRICS. I haven't kept super high track of it, but I think at present there's somewhere between 60 and 70 nations now represented as they go through the finalization of the application process of the various countries. How big do you surmise BRICS will be by year's end? Will it be over 100 nations? And will that basically do you believe that we believe that what Trump is doing is like we look at Argentina as a baseline, right? He, as you saw, he did an article where he and Malay have been working for a while now, the past year. And he's recently come out with an article. I don't have it in front of me right now, but I'm sure you've seen it. Zero tariffs with Argentina. Is that basically what he's going to do with the BRICS nations to say, look, I'll remove the sanctions, I'll remove the taxes. In return, we want the best rates and we will free you up off of the Federal Reserve. We'll back our dollar with gold and allow you to be autonomous so that the dollar hegemony is no longer on you. Because, like you said, reciprocal trade is whatever they charge us, we're going to charge them. It doesn't preclude that there has to be one. It could just be zero. And so, do you think that's sort of the track he's going with, that Argentina is laying the baseline for the rest of the BRICS nations?
I think that's exactly what he's doing. And reciprocal, zero could be reciprocal,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
You just go. I mean, you've got to protect national industry still, and Trump's smart enough, and a little smart enough. So you've got to have a sit down for it to work. You have to have that agreement with all the nations to not create an imbalance. The U.S. can't give up its still, so industry or chip industry, et cetera. When you look at those, but I do think he is laying that groundwork for what to expect. He doesn't want BRICS to have a common currency, but he's all about them having a common payment processing so that they can move money back and forth between them. But he wants every nation to have its own sovereign currency. He wants England to have England's, France to have France's, Germany to have Germany's, the U.S. to have Argentina, Vietnam, all of them to have their own currency. So a lot of people misunderstand what he's trying to do when he makes those comments. He just doesn't want a one world currency.
Right.
He wants parity between them all. He wants everybody to be sovereign, which is very unusual out of a world leader.
That's true. And to your point, parity, and I would even go so far as to say sovereignty, nationalism, like we're going to be going back to the constitutional republic. He wants them to have a sense of individual nationalism and still work within, a trade relationship with the US. There is room for two. It doesn't have to be in a vacuum, I believe so.
And so many people out there just are the belief that it's got to be this way or that way.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it have to be this way? It can be something completely in between, something mutually beneficial, and Trump sees it as business.
Exactly.
The best business deals are when both parties walk away from the table feeling like they won.
100%. 100%. Mark, as we close up for this one today, as we always do typically with our guests, I will give you the last word, last thoughts you have for the audience, and where can people find your work?
The original Mark Z at excuse me, the originalmarkz.com. The originalmarkz.com is the easiest place to go to find us. Also, just original Mark Z on Twitter. Easiest place to find us. Final one, just guys, I know it's been a long haul. I know we all get frustrated that it hasn't gone yet, but keep the faith. God's got great things in store for us and for you. And when I
Yes.
say for you, I'm talking to people out there in the audience. I already know he's got great things planned for John. I can't wait to meet that future wife.
Yeah, it makes two of us. Thanks, Mark. And you will, you definitely will. No, that's a great way to, I think, to summarize everything. And folks, um, for Mark's audience and certainly my audience knows this, we have some great relationships with some great gold dealers like, Noble Gold, Miles Franklin, which I know you're good buddies with Andy, and he always has glowing things to say about you with for good reason. And so we have some trusted partners there. So we will leave that link in the description. If you're looking to get gold or silver, or add to the cache what you have, you see the prices are continuing to uptick and it doesn't look to be going down, just the opposite. And then, of course, if you are looking for currencies, dinar, dong, zim, rupiah, and all the rest of the countries, we will leave that link in the description as well. Mr. Mark Z, it's been a pleasure. This long time coming, and I think it's at the right time, at God's time. And we thank you for being here today. God bless you, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.
Take care. Thank you, John.
Thank you, brother. Folks, for over a year now, we've been extolling the virtues of buying precious metals. As you can see, Fort Knox is about to be audited, and that's imminent, and you're going to see that gold reserves are little to none. What do you think that'll do to the price of gold? And with silver being ransacked with COMEX on the markets, that's sure to follow as well. The only question is, are you going to take action or not? If you haven't, what are you waiting for? And if you have, please take a moment to visit one of our great sponsors here below, the link in the description, and call for the information. It's free. The consultation is free. The cost of not taking advantage of this has lasting consequences, folks. Please tell them John and Chris sent you. You'll be more than happy that you did.